If you love emotional stories, make sure to subscribe, because the next story might just change the way you see love and life. The cafe was alive with its usual morning chaos. Machines hissing steam, cups clinking against saucers, conversations blending into a hum that filled the air. Outside, the city was still waking, its streets coated with the shimmer of dew and the rush of people heading to work. Inside, the scent of freshly ground beans wrapped around every corner, offering a moment of warmth to those who pause in their hurried routines. For David, mornings were always a race. As a single father, his days started not with quiet reflection, but with small shoes to tie, backpacks to pack, and a daughter who needed both breakfast and reassurance before facing school. He carried the weight of two roles, and though he wore his exhaustion with practiced calm, it often showed in the slump of his shoulders. That morning, he had stopped at the cafe for a quick coffee, one small luxury in a life often defined by sacrifice. But fate has a way of rewriting ordinary mornings. As he balanced his coffee cup in his daughter's hand, a sudden bump from a passerby sent the drink spilling forward. The dark liquid splashed across the counter and down his sleeve, leaving him startled and embarrassed. His daughter's wide eyes mirrored his own frustration, and for a moment he felt the sting of defeat in something as simple as a ruined cup of coffee. That was when she appeared. From the far side of the cafe, a woman rose quickly from her seat, napkins in hand, her movements graceful yet urgent. She stepped forward without hesitation, dabbing at the spill, offering a small kindness in a place where most would have simply looked away. Her presence was disarming, calm, attentive, and gentle in a way that seemed to quiet the noise around them. For David, the embarrassment began to fade, replaced by something he hadn't expected to feel. Gratitude mixed with a flicker of warmth. His daughter watched closely, her small smile revealing a spark of approval. In her innocent world, this stranger's act wasn't just politeness. It was kindness, something she longed for her father to receive more often. The woman knelt briefly, ensuring the child was unharmed, and in that fleeting gesture, something shifted. It was as though the cafe, once filled with strangers, had become the stage for a connection neither of them had planned. But while the moment seemed tender, not everyone in the cafe saw it that way. From a corner table, a man sat with his arms crossed, his gaze sharp and unyielding. His eyes followed the woman's every move, not with admiration but with something darker. He watched her laugh softly at the small mess, watched her linger longer than necessary, and his jaw tightened. He was her past, a shadow she thought she'd left behind, but one unwilling to release its grip. David, unaware of the eyes tracking them, focused only on the quiet comfort of the moment. For once, he wasn't just a weary father managing a dozen responsibilities. He was simply a man touched by the kindness of a stranger. He didn't know yet how quickly kindness could blossom into something deeper, or how much resistance they might face from those unwilling to let go. As the cafe returned to its rhythm, one small spill had already begun to rewrite the lives of 3 people. And this was only the beginning. The morning spill might have lasted only a few seconds, but its ripple carried far beyond that cafe. For David, the woman's kindness lingered in his thoughts as he walked his daughter to school. He replayed her smile, the gentle way she knelt to make sure his little girl was okay, and the calmness in her presence that had steadied his frantic morning. It was rare for someone to pause long enough to see him, not just as a father juggling responsibilities, but as a man carrying quiet burdens. Days passed, and yet fate seemed determined to weave their paths together again. One afternoon, after work, David returned to the same cafe. It was not routine. Part of him hoped to see her again, though he wouldn't admit it, even to himself. His daughter tugged at his hand, her eyes bright with the excitement of pastries in the display. And then, there she was, sitting near the window, a book open in her hands, sunlight spilling across her face like it had been waiting just for her. When she noticed him, her smile was immediate, not the cautious kind people offer strangers, but one of recognition, warmth, and something that hinted at familiarity. It was enough to ease a hesitation in his steps, enough to make him feel welcome in her presence. His daughter's innocent curiosity broke the silence of distance, and soon their table became hers too. The book closed, the laughter opened, and for the first time in years, David felt the air lighten around him. Conversations grew easily, not forced but natural, like they had both been waiting for someone who could listen without judgment. She asked about his daughter, and he found himself sharing stories of bedtime routines, school projects, and the way fatherhood, though exhausting, had given his life meaning. In return, she spoke about her work, her love for books, and her quiet desire to find peace in a world that often seemed loud and unkind. Their lives were different, yet their hearts seemed to beat in familiar rhythms. But in the corner of the cafe, unseen by David, the same man from before was there again. He sat at his usual spot, a coffee cooling in front of him, untouched. His eyes were fixed not on the cup but on the woman who laughed freely now, a freedom that seemed to sting him. His posture was rigid, his expression dark, and the resentment in his gaze was sharp enough to cut through the moment. She hadn't noticed him yet, but he noticed everything. As David helped his daughter wipe a crumb from her cheek, the woman caught a flicker of something, a glance over her shoulder that froze her for just a heartbeat. That shadow from her past, the one she thought she had left behind, was still present. The warmth of the cafe seemed to dim, but she forced her smile to remain, unwilling to let old change ruin new beginnings. David didn't see the full story in her eyes, but he sensed a heaviness behind her laughter, as though kindness came easily to her, but peace was harder to hold. He didn't push, but something inside him stirred, a desire not just to enjoy her company, but to protect the fragile calm she carried. For now, the laughter filled the space between them, while the jealous eyes in the corner grew colder, waiting for the right moment to intrude. The bond was forming, fragile yet real, but shadows in the past were never far behind, and soon they would no longer stay silent. The air inside the cafe had been filled with warmth, childlike giggles, soft conversations, and the clink of cups against saucers. But beneath that surface, tension brewed, unseen by David, but deeply felt by her. She knew those eyes too well. The man in the corner wasn't just a stranger. He was the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. He had once held her hand, once promised her a future. But promises had turned to poison. What lingered now was control, sharp words, and a love that suffocated more than it freed. She had walked away months ago, gathering her courage like shattered glass, cutting herself in the process but determined to step forward. Yet, seeing him there again, watching, was like hearing chains rattle a room she thought was locked. David noticed her sudden shift, the way her smile faltered at the edges. He didn't pry, but his instincts as both a father and a man told him something wasn't right. His daughter tugged at his sleeve, still blissfully unaware, and he used the distraction to buy her a small pastry. While she delighted in the treat, his gaze drifted, finally landing on the man in the corner. The stranger's eyes were cold, his posture too fixed, his attention unerringly focused on her. The realization tightened David's chest. He didn't know the history, didn't know the details, but he recognized danger when he saw it. As a single father, he had lived through enough storms to spot the warning signs. His instinct was to protect, though he knew the story wasn't his to claim. The ex finally stood, his chair scraping against the floor in a way that made heads turn. He walked over, not with warmth but with entitlement, like someone approaching what he believed still belonged to him. The woman's breath caught, and her fingers curled tightly around her cup. David straightened, his body quietly shifting, a silent barrier forming even before words were exchanged. Though the ex's words were low and sharp, it wasn't hard to catch their venom in the air. He leaned too close, spoke too firmly, reminding her wound she had tried to heal. The cafe's comfortable chatter thinned, curiosity replacing it as eyes followed the scene. Some customers looked away, not wanting to intervene, but David could not stand still. His voice was calm, steady, protective, not confrontational, but clear enough to remind a man that he was not welcome. For a moment, the ex's glare shifted between them. The woman he refused to let go, the man now sitting by her side, and the child who looked up innocently, sensing tension but not understanding it. The jealousy in his eyes sharpened into something more dangerous. He spat a bitter remark, his pride wounded by David's quiet strength, before storming out of the cafe, his presence leaving behind a trail of unease. The woman's hands trembled slightly as she set her cup down, relief mixed with fear, as though she knew this wasn't the end, but only the beginning of more storms to come. David offered no questions, only presence. His daughter leaned into him, grounding the moment with her innocent chatter, as though reminding both adults that life still had pieces of light worth holding on to. But as they left the cafe that day, the woman couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. And David, though silent, knew this encounter wasn't finished. He had stepped into something bigger than spilled coffee and chance meetings. He had stepped into a story where love was shadowed by danger, and where standing by her might come with consequences he hadn't yet imagined. The ex was gone for now, but jealousy rarely walks away quietly. The true test of courage and love was only beginning. The days that followed carried a strange mixture of light and shadow. For David, life went on as usual. Work shifts, school runs, helping his daughter with homework at the small kitchen table. Yet, Beneath the ordinary routines, there was something new, an unspoken bond with the woman from the cafe. They exchanged small messages, shared brief walks, and sometimes lingered too long outside the very place where their paths had first collided. Each moment was simple, almost fragile, but it stirred a warmth David hadn't felt in years. Yet warmth rarely goes unnoticed, and sometimes it draws the cold. The ex had not disappeared as easily as they had hoped. He lingered, not in open confrontation, but in subtle ways. He made sure to be seen, standing across the street when she left work, parked near the cafe when she arrived, or casually positioned in places where whispers travel faster than truth. People began to notice, and curiosity soon twisted into gossip. Neighbors murmured about how quickly she seemed to be moving on. Some wondered aloud whether David, a single father, was the right kind of man for her. Others whispered harsher things, that she was reckless, that she hadn't truly closed a chapter of her past. Words carried weight, and though neither of them wanted to admit it, those whispers began to build invisible walls between them. For David, it was a quiet ache. He had spent years protecting his daughter from judgment, from those who pitted her for not having a mother or who scrutinized his every choice as a parent. To now see the same scrutiny directed at this woman, the same cloud of doubt hanging over her, filled him with both anger and sorrow. He had not asked for love to appear, yet now that it had, he feared it might be crushed before it even had the chance to breathe. For her, the pressure was heavier still. She had fought hard to free herself from the grip of her past, but the ex's presence and the murmurs of society made her question whether she was truly free at all. Every time she caught sight of him in the distance, she felt pulled back into chains she thought she had broken. And every time someone hinted that she should be careful about David, her confidence wavered. She wanted to trust what was growing between them, yet doubt crept in like cracks in glass. David noticed a change. Her laughter was softer, her steps less steady, her eyes often wandering toward unseen fears. He tried to anchor her with patience, reminding her through small gestures that she wasn't alone. His daughter, too, sensed something in her, often reaching for her hand and pulling her into their little world of innocent joy. For brief moments, those gestures kept the shadows at bay. But the ex was patient in his cruelty. He began spreading his own version of the story, painting himself as a victim, claiming she was being manipulated by another man. A few believed him, enough to fuel the whispers further. And when she overheard one of those conversations, the shame and fear nearly unraveled her resolve. Still, beneath the weight of judgment, something unexpected held steady: David's unwavering presence. He didn't push, didn't demand, didn't rush her to decide. He simply stood beside her, quietly bearing the storm, as though reminding her that even in the darkest weather, there could be shelter. Yet, the storm was far from over. The ex had not finished, and his jealousy was sharpening into something more dangerous. And as fate would have it, one evening, when the cafe lights glowed against the night, that danger would finally come too close to ignore. Love was blooming, but so were the storms of jealousy and doubt. The night ahead would test them both more than whispers ever could. The evening unfolded quietly, the kind of night that promised nothing unusual. The cafe glowed warmly from within, its windows fogged slightly from the chatter and clinking of cups inside. David had promised to meet her there after picking up his daughter from a friend's house, and she had arrived early, her heart both nervous and hopeful. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine that life could be simple again, that kindness had outweighed judgment, and that love could grow without fear. But simplicity rarely lasts when shadows linger. As she sat by the window, she felt it again, the unmistakable presence of eyes watching her. The ex was there, seated at the far corner, pretending to sip his drink while his gaze never wavered. His presence was no accident. It was a performance, staged to intimidate, to remind her that moving forward would come at a price. The air grew heavy, the murmurs of the cafe blending into a suffocating hum. David arrived moments later, carrying with him the warmth of his steady presence. He greeted her with a gentle smile, unaware at first of the figure in the corner. But then he noticed the stare, the tension, the way her hands trembled slightly on the table. In that instant, he understood. This wasn't just jealousy anymore. This was control, manipulation, and cruelty, lingering long after it should have ended. The ex rose, slow and deliberate, his steps echoing louder than the room's chatter. Conversations paused, eyes turned, and the cafe seemed to shrink into silence. He positioned himself near their table, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. He wanted to humiliate, to provoke, to make David seem small and her feel trapped. It was the same cycle she had lived through before, the same fear pressing down on her chest. But this time, something was different. David didn't shrink. He didn't match anger with anger, nor did he cower under the weight of the ex's threats. Instead, he spoke calmly, firmly, with a conviction that resonated through the room. He reminded the ex, and everyone listening, that love was not possession, that respect was not control, and that she was not property to be claimed. His words weren't grand or theatrical. They were simple truths spoken with courage. And then something remarkable happened. The café, filled with strangers, began to murmur, not in judgment this time, but in support. A waitress stepped forward, standing near her as if to shield her. A man at another table nodded toward David, his silent approval carrying weight. The community, once a source of whispers and doubt, shifted in that moment, turning its gaze on the one who had caused harm rather than the ones who had chosen love. The ex faltered under the weight of that collective strength. His arrogance cracked, his posture stiffened, and for the first time, it was he who looked out of place. Realizing that the room no longer held power for him, he turned and left, his departure marked not by victory, but by defeat. In the silence that followed, she felt something inside her release, a chain she had carried for far too long finally breaking. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from fear. They were from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that she was no longer alone in her fight. David reached for her hand, steady and sure, as if to promise that courage wasn't just found in moments of confrontation, but in the quiet commitment to stand beside someone no matter the storm. The cafe slowly returned to its usual rhythm, yet for them, everything had changed. What began with a spilled cup of coffee had become something neither of them expected, a love strong enough to face judgment, jealousy, and fear, and still stand tall. Outside, the night sky stretched wide, its stars hidden but still present, much like their future, uncertain, yet undeniably filled with light. If you enjoyed the story, rate it out of 10 in the comments, and don't forget to like the video.